push my record button. Okay, I got that going. Let me get to where I can write on this thing. How are we going to figure out what the answer is? And this is a good one to look at the answers.
Okay.
This last sentence is a little confusing, of which the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants. I'm not quite sure what that means.
Yeah.
But if you look at the first three answers, they're just factoring.
Yeah, that's what I noticed.
Well, how does that factor?
Well, let me get my paper.
I think I know what they mean, but go ahead. Go ahead and factor it.
Okay.
In other words, you factor by setting one side, the y equal to 0. And the reason you do that is because what we're looking for are these 2 points right here.
Right. Yep.
Well, we don't really even need to factor that, do we?
Nope.
Answer.
Let's see, y equals x plus 3 parentheses x minus 5.
Yeah. Now, let's see if that's really what they were asking for. Which of the following is the equivalent form of the equation of the graph shown? Well, is that it? That certainly has the proper zeros. The question is, I'm a little confused. They're giving.
What is it referring to, like constants?
What's that?
What is it referring to when it says like the constant, like the coordinates of vertex A?
I'm trying to figure that out because which of the following is the equivalent form of the equation of the graph shown in xy plane? Well, they're giving us the equation of the graph, so it's not likely that that's the answer, whether it's in factored form or not. In other words, all I've done is factored it, so we're looking at the same thing. Now, let's see if we can figure out what they really want. From which the coordinates of vertex A can be identified as constants. Well, we can't do that in this equation. I can't figure out what the coordinates of vertex A are.
Well,
how about that? Notice what format that's in. That's in vertex format. I know what the vertex is. The vertex is 1 minus 16, which indeed agrees with that right there. That vertex is at 1 minus 16. So this almost certainly has to be the answer. Now, the question is that the same as that? Is all we did was we put it into x-intercept.
Oh, yeah, you're just changing formats.
Yeah, and this is the proper equation, but it doesn't allow us to figure out the vertex.
Right, and that's what it's wanting. Yeah.
This one out, you get x squared minus 2x plus 1 minus 16, which is the same equation. Now, the real proper way to do this would be to complete the squares, get it in vertex format, but in all honesty, the moment I understood the question, I didn't even need to consider the first three answers. This got to be, that's the only one that's in vertex format, and you kind of have to have it in vertex format in order to know what the vertex is, and the vertex is based on those constants.
Yeah.
When they say constants, they don't mean x.
Right.
Or coefficients of x. What they mean are that number and that number, or that number. Okay. So
that makes sense. Yep.
This actually is an easy question as long as you understand the question. And it's not that easy to understand. It took me quite a while to understand it. So it kind of shows you their cleverness. Not always just about hard math.
It's maybe just about being able to like understand like what they're asking for more so than anything else.
Kinda, and understanding vertex format. You wanna know that a standard parabola, the most standard format that a parabola is given, is in vertex format. And the reason is the vertex is staring at you. It's x minus h squared plus k.
So let me ask you this then. So for the ACT, is that more so of what they're trying to go for? Is that complex, like kind of understanding, like giving you different like kind of graphs and charts to look at, and then just kind of diving in and trying to do more analytical thought?
This is more SAT.
Okay, yeah.
SAT gets a little more subtle, I guess is the word I'm looking for. Their questions are a little more subtle. That was an easy question, but because of the way they worded it, it wasn't real clear what they were looking for. And I've been tutoring algebra for 9 years now. And even me, who I do vertex format once a week. And it wasn't clear to me that that's what they were really asking for, is which equation is in vertex format.
Sure.
If they'd have used those words, we'd have seen it was an easy question and D had to be the answer. They didn't use those words. So a little more subtlety.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right. How about we weren't done, which says something. That means 30 wasn't the hardest question on the test. But we're going to look at some reasonably difficult ones now, I'm quite sure. These are grid, and grid is always calculator, I guess. Although I thought they were, it looks like there's two sections of grid where one's calculator and one isn't.
Okay. So
31 easy, medium, or hard?
easy?
I think so. So let's do it. In other words, whenever you come across an easy problem, go ahead and do it. If you find yourself spending 3 minutes on it, then it's not so easy. It's more like medium and put a check mark and move on. But I agree with you. This is easy.
Oh, and so for this one, I'm noticing since it's not even multiple choice, this would be one of the ones you actually have to write down in your booklet.
Yes, this is a grid question, meaning you have to grid in your answer.
Okay.
So, I mean, first of all, look at the question. What is a possible amount? So we must have multiple answers here. All we got to do is find one.
Okay.
Well, he can do 12 dozen ears of corn per hour. How long is it going to take him to do 72 dozen? You can use your calculator and use it.
That's what I'm going to do. So he could do about do that in about 6 hours.
Exactly. That's all you need. What is one possible time? Well, okay. Now, if you have questions as to whether you're going to divide 72 by 12 or you're going to divide 12 by 72, okay, let's figure out how we can answer that. It's 72 dozen I'll abbreviate like that. Ears of corn divided, if we decide we're going to do it this way, dozen ears of corn per hour. Now, does that produce the appropriate units? That's always the question. Now, actually, you might not even ask yourself that question here. You might instantly realize that 6 hours is an answer. And when you do, put it in there. This is perhaps an easy question because it's the first question on this section. In other words, SAT is a little different than ACT. ACT gives you a 60-question math test. And the first 20 are going to be the easiest. The next 20 are going to be the medium. Well, SAT puts their difficulty in easy to hard order, but per section. They don't just give you 60 questions and the first 20 are easy. This is more of there's like 4 different sections. There's a calculator grid, calculator multiple choice. There's a non-calculator grid, non-calculator multiple choice. And so the first few questions of each of those sections are going to be the easy ones. I mean, you might only have 15 questions per those 4 sections. 60 questions. It's just they're broken up, and each section appears to go easy, medium, hard. Now, what'd you get for units when you did that?
Dozens of corn per hour.
No.
Oh, no, it's 6 hours. So
6 hours, yeah, but let's make sure you know how to get that. First of all, we're going to flip the bottom and multiply. In other words, even though we're dividing a whole number by another whole number, and we don't need to use that technique, to figure out how our units are going to be, we do have to use that technique. In other words, this is equal to 72 dozen corn multiplied by 1 over 12, and if I reverse those also, which I need to do, that becomes hours per corn, or per dozen corn. And now your dozen corn cancels, and you're left with your proper units. And what that's going to tell you is that you did it the proper way. In other words, if maybe you were wondering, should I divide 12 by 72, you don't get hours. You get 1 over hours. So that will always answer your question as to how to do these kind of problems if you have questions about it. But actually, this is a good point where if I have corn divided by corn per hour, I got to flip that and multiply, giving you hours, which is correct. You need hours in the numerator.
Okay. So I have another question then. So I've also noticed, like, sometimes, like, even like during like when I'm doing math in class and things like that nature, and I'm taking tests especially, I can make really simple errors even though I do know how to do the problem. And it's just like simple stuff like maybe entering in my calculator wrong, like not using parentheses or something of that nature, or forgetting some units. Like, what's a good way to practice to kind of avoid doing that?
What's your calculator? It's a TI-84?
Yeah.
See, unfortunately, it's very easy to get it wrong on a TI-84 because of what you say, parentheses.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't think a calculator is really that valuable on these tests. But that's given the fact that I have really good arithmetic skills. In other words, I knew immediately 72 divided by 12 was 6.
Yeah, that is pretty good.
Use a calculator to do that. Now,
Yeah.
72 divided by 18 is 4. So that's also a possible answer, 4 hours. And, you know, the real answer I want to give you is try not to use your calculator. If you can do these in your head, a lot of times you're better off. But 72 by 12, there's not many people that really can do that more accurately than you're going to do it on a calculator. So I wouldn't necessarily say do these without a calculator. I would not, for sure. If you can use a calculator and you're doing 2 digits divided by another double-digit number, then do the calculator. I would probably use it just to double-check my answer.
Okay.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Yeah, because like even when I'm sometimes like using logarithms and stuff like that, and I'm just viewing, and I'm just trying to like do reverse functions or find similarities, like just not using parentheses can just make things completely different.
Brutal. Where do you go to school, Ben?
Lakewood High School.
They haven't insisted that you upgrade to the TI Inspire yet?
No, no one's even mentioned it. I mean, I've had this one for like 2 years now.
Yeah.
And they haven't really told me any different.
Because all of the schools around me, like Chatfield and Dakota Ridge, they all are forcing all freshmen and above to go to the Inspire. And the advantage of the Inspire is that you don't have to worry about parentheses. If you're writing something in exponential format, it shows you exactly what it would show if you were writing it on a piece of paper. And that really makes it easier because it really does eliminate this problem of not getting your parentheses correct. And that's hard to do on a TI-84. It really is. Because they don't tell you what you put in. They don't give you any feedback.
Yeah.
Whereas the TI Inspire not only tells you what you're inputting, but it puts it in the same way you would write it on a piece of paper. If something's being exponentiated, it's got it as an exponent, not as an up arrow, to the third power, something like that.
Okay. I guess I could try to look into getting one of those.
In terms, I'm not sure that well, be careful about that because the TI Inspire that most people have is not allowed on the SAT test.
Oh, really?
It's so good that it'll do factoring, it'll do basically anything that you can ask. It's that good. It's a major upgrade, but it's also a major learning curve switch from the TI-84 to the Inspire. It's like going from an Apple to an IBM. I would definitely not recommend that. They allow the TI Inspire if it doesn't have the CAS, but everybody has the CAS version. So that has to be turned off, and I don't think you want to fool with that. Gosh, I want to say focus. In other words, if you want to be perfect, you have to try to be perfect. And if you don't try to be perfect and you allow yourself to answer questions in a haphazard manner, then that's going to happen. And whether you're in class or whether you're taking the SAT. So there's a degree of perfection that you have to have. And it's with math, not so much with other stuff, but with math, there's, close only counts in horseshoes and something else, but
grenades.
It doesn't usually count in math. So there's definitely a need to try to be perfect.
Okay.
I don't quite know how to tutor you on that, on being, a perfectionist.
Yeah.
It's a quality that comes in handy when you're doing math. Every one of these problems we're doing has like 5 or 6 steps, and you can't miss one of them. If you get one of them wrong, you're getting the problem wrong. So that's why I say you can't just be 80% correct or 90% correct. A lot of these problems, you have to be 100% correct. In other words, at every step of the problem.
Okay.
All right, so let's read 32. And this could be an easy problem. This is not necessarily a hard problem. All right, this is not multiple choice, so we're going to have to come up with an equation or an inequality. So let's start with what the weight is going to be on the bridge when this truck passes over it as a algebraic expression.
Okay.
So what's the least amount? In other words, an empty truck. What's that going to be?
X.
In other words, read empty delivery truck and its driver weighs 4,500.
45. Oh, okay. Sorry. I was looking at that one above it.
Okay. So here's the minimum weight with no boxes that would be on the bridge. That's less than 6,000. We're okay. But now we're going to add boxes. So what's the total amount of boxes going to weigh? In terms of X, these are X identical boxes, each weighing 14 pounds.
So 14 plus 14x.
Yeah. And the rest of the expression, that has to be not equal, but less than.
Less than, yeah.
To what?
6,000 pounds.
Correct. And now that's relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
This is definitely calculator's gonna be useful. So give me the next line. Just go through it using your calculator line by line. What's the next line gonna be?
So
I don't know any other way to do this problem without algebraically solving it.
Right.
We can't use back solving, we can't use pick numbers because it's not multiple choice. Those two methods are only for multiple choice.
Okay.
Okay.
So for the next line, I got 14x is less than or equal to 1,500 pounds.
Okay. Next line.
And next line is going to be x is equal to 107.14.
Hold on, it's not equal. It's less than or equal.
Yeah, is less than or equal to 107.14.
107.14. Now let's look at the question. What's the maximum possible value of X that will keep the combined weight of the truck, driver, and boxes below 6,000? What's the answer?
107.
Yeah. It's not this. You would get no credit for that. Because you can't have 1/1400ths of a box.
Right.
That's what we're looking at. X is the number of identical boxes.
Yeah.
So the maximum would be 107. So this wasn't hard at all. This was pretty easy.
Yeah, it's pretty easy, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not even that hard to algebraically set up the inequality. Especially when they tell you what the variable is. I mean, they're defining the variable. They didn't have to even do that, but they did. Carrying X identical boxes. So X is the number of boxes. All right, let's go back and look at 33. Now, another problem that perhaps would have been on the science test on the ACT. When you see a problem like this, I want your eyes to first thing focus on the title. Figure out what the title says. Okay? Next, figure out the horizontal axis and then the vertical axis.
Okay.
Once you understand those three things, then the rest of it should be pretty easy.
Okay.
Okay? So, what are you going to do?
Sorry, what did you say?
So, what's my next step? Now that I've read the question.
Well, I haven't read the question yet.
That's fine. See, I hadn't read the question. My first step was to read the title and understand what axis is. Okay. Then I read the question. And sometimes it can be helpful to underline the key parts. That's certainly a key part of the question. Well, let's answer that before we do anything else. What's that number right there?
It's 100 million.
Okay. So that answer is 100 million, and it's what fraction of the numbers sold in 2011? What's that number?
160 million.
So it's 100 million over 160 million.
Mm-hmm.
What's the answer?
Choose, reduce.
See, this is where your calculator, and well, go ahead. You can use your calculator, but make sure there's a key feature on your calculator that if you're going to use your calculator on this, you need to know this feature. And it's the feature that gives you, lets you translate a decimal answer to a fractional answer. Because they're not going to want a decimal answer on this.
Yeah. I wasn't going to use my calculator for it because I could just reduce it, but.
If you can come up with a fractional answer from your calculator, then fine, go ahead and do it. But you have to know what that key is.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't going to use my calculator for it because I thought I could just do it without it.
Well, you can. First of all, cross out that 0 and that 0.
Yeah.
Now we're down to 10/16, and now just reduce that. That would not give you any credit because it's not simple. Yeah. Right. How do you simplify that?
Divide both 10 and 16 by 2.
Okay, so now I got 5 over 8. That is simplified. That's the answer.
Yeah.
And that is a fraction. It's a ratio. No units on it. The millions crossed each other. All right, so these first three were actually all pretty easy. This one was the easiest one yet.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's true in the ACT, is that the ACT has 3 types of questions on the science, and one of them is interpreting charts and graphs, and that's the easiest part of the science test on the ACT. In other words, they always tell you, do all of those first.
Yeah, I was talking to my parents, and I told them I'm thinking I'm going to go. I think it'd be a good idea for me to just take the ACT too.
I think so, because you don't know which one you're going to be better at. And you really don't. And I have no way of telling which one you would be better at. But if you happen to score radically different on them, then obviously you're going to go with the one, if you're 80th percentile on one and 70th percentile on another, you're going to send the 80th percentile results to the college.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and also I would always recommend don't send it to the college until you've had a chance to look at it.
Mm-hmm. There's like a $10 fee for that, right?
There is, and it's well worth it, because especially if you're going to take it multiple times. And depending on where you go to school, they may have this super scoring system where the ACT, they actually have, if you take it, say, 3 times, you can take your best score on the English, your best score on the math, your best score on the science, and your best score on the reading, and put them together and make that your ACT score. So that really benefits people who take it multiple times, because you're usually going to have a little bit of discrepancy, even just randomly, between your scores, you know, even if nothing has.
Yeah.
So, yeah, unless, you know, you're a senior and you're in the spring, you're taking it for the last time for sure, then I would not have it sent to the school until you see the results.
Yeah. Okay.
And maybe the same with the essay part. You might want to at least post one essay. I'm sure that everybody hates writing essays as much as I do. But the problem is you may end up applying to a school that wants the essay. And you have to go, you can't just take the essay on its own. You got to take the whole test.
Yeah, that's what they told me.
Yeah.
Because we were looking at that, and I've already made a list of the schools, the ones that I really like and I want to go visit and all that stuff. And none of them required the essay, at least for the ones that I'm looking at right now.
Okay.
And I talked to parents, and then so we went to like a college planning night, and then found out like the deadline for the essay was like way past gone, and I'm like, well, that's not good.
Yeah. No, well, if you have a finite number of schools and that's all you're looking at, and none of them need the essay, then that's fine. But a lot of students, you know, they don't know which school they may end up going to, and you don't want to discover at the last minute that they need the essay and you haven't posted one.
No, yeah.
And then you got to go back and retake the whole 3.5-hour test.
Yeah, it's kind of weird too, because I mean the essay style that they're looking for is it's rhetorical analysis, which is everything that I've been doing this year for the first part of the year, at least in AP AP language.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always studied for that first half. And so, I mean, I'm sure like at least that gives me more of an advantage than other kids that like aren't in that class. But
if you think you're going to do well on the essay, then definitely take it. Anything that is your strong suit.
Yeah.
Emphasize that for sure. I mean, because
writing definitely that.
Yeah, if you happen to post a good essay score, which is anything above a 7, you know, the essay score is between 2 and 12, at least on the ACT. SAT is slightly different. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because the way they, at least, but like, yeah, you're right. Because what we've been doing this year so far has been that 9-point scoring AP on like AP grading scale, and I just got my first 9. What was it, like 2 weeks ago?
Okay.
And that's like the equivalent of an 8. There's 8 plus. That is what they told me. There's nothing above a 9.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah.
All right. Well, go on here and look at number 34. This apparently is the word problem section.
Yeah.
But so far, none of them have been terribly tough.
No, I haven't been.
In fact, I would say the other way around. All 4 of these might be 4 of the easiest problems on the whole test.
Yeah, how is that?
I don't know. Maybe it's the fact that this is the word problem and graph section. I don't know.
Huh.
It just shows you that you can't go based on the number of the question. You just have to kind of, you want to go through the test the first time doing all the ones you can do, whether they're easy, medium, or hard. If you can do it, do it. That's the strategy. So what's going on with this?
Let's see. Okay. So that's really easy.
So tell me. Yeah, I'm trying to keep my mouth shut because I think you can do it all on your own.
Yeah. Let me go ahead and do the math. So 96 slots?
Uh-huh. Yeah, the first step is to figure out how many you can sell per day. Well, there's double. If there's 24 hours in a day, there's 48 30-minute time slots. And then he's talking about 2 days, so you multiply that by 2.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Just curious. Now, this is the end of the test. Okay. So the last question is 38, but the last section, I'm fairly amazed. These are the last 4 problems.
Surprisingly easy.
Test 1, and the previous 4 were quite easy.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at 35. Now tell me what's the first thing you have to know here on this problem.
How to find diameter?
No, that's what they're asking. That's the last thing you have to know. What's the first thing you have to know? Hold on, I forgot what I was doing here.
Know how they got the volume.
Exactly. What's the formula for volume of a right cylinder? You know what it is?
I don't.
Okay. If you don't know what it is, do this. I don't know how far back we have to go, but at the beginning of the math test, they give you all these formulas. Right there. So when you're taking the test, bookmark this page because you may have to go back and refer to it. What's the volume of a right cylinder?
Volume is pi r squared h.
Okay. I don't know where that chart is on. It may only be at the very beginning, and that's it. I'm trying to get back to our problem. All right. So that's the first thing you want to write. In other words, a really good way to begin problems is with the equation that governs the whole problem. Okay, so V equals pi r squared, which you'll notice is the area of the base, times the height. All prisms are like that. A prism being where this area here is equal and opposite to this area here. Equal, opposite, parallel. Anytime you have that, you have a prism. And the formula for the volume of a prism is the area of one of the bases times the thickness between the two bases. And that's what this says, okay? Now, they give us the height, so we don't need to represent that with h. We can put in an 8. And they give us the volume. So now I got 72 pi equals pi r squared times 8. Now they ask for the diameter, but what can we solve from this immediately?
solve for r.
Yeah. So then the diameter is just twice that. So this really is a problem of solving for the radius. It's just trick it up just a little bit. When you're talking geometry, there's very few things that are in terms of diameter. It's just not a key variable, oddly enough. But everything is in terms of radius. Everything about a circle is radius. Everything about a sphere is radius. A lot about right cylinders is radius. All the formulas are in terms of radius. I even give the circumference of a circle in terms of radius, even though I could make it a little bit simpler and give it in terms of diameter. I never, ever use that as the general formula. Because why introduce this other variable, diameter? Everything is radius. So, solve that equation for radius. You probably want to have I don't know if you have a piece of paper and pencil in front of you or not.
Yeah, I do. I got it out. Okay.
Well, this is one where you're going to want to write this on your piece of paper and then solve it. What do you get?
So I actually have a question real quick. So when you're solving like these types of equations, is it just like how you're doing like any other one where you're subtracting things by both sides first and then dividing?
Well, I'm not subtracting anything because nothing's being added.
Is it just so it's just dividing then, right?
That's right. The very first thing I can do is divide both sides by pi.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that makes it a whole lot easier. In other words, you don't want to be inputting pi into your calculator. You want to simplify this equation before you solve it. What's the next step? Now I got this. 72 equals r squared times 8.
Yeah, divide by 8.
Okay, now I got 9 equals r squared.
And, yep, so that would just be 3 squared.
The solution to this is to take the square root of both sides. I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Now, you did it in your head and figured out that r had to be 3. But if we had more difficult numbers here, you wouldn't be able to do that. So you have an equation where one side, if I've got x squared equals 25, I solve this by taking the square root of both sides. When I take the square root of that, I get x. When I take the square root of that, I get 5. I actually get plus minus 5. But when we're dealing with dimensions, you don't ever bring forth the minus answer. So we figured out radius. Now you got to avoid the one mistake that they're hoping you make. The problem didn't ask for radius.
Yeah, the one's diameter.
So what's the diameter? The radius is 3.
Yep, so squared, so it's not 9.
Nope. The radius is half of the diameter.
Oh, 6.
Yeah. In other words, there's 2 radiuses that make up the diameter. They're each 3. Okay. Now.
Yeah, this is like the simple, like,
perfect
stupid stuff I make.
What you just described to me.
Yeah.
In other words, you worked through the entire problem. You figured out how to do it. You got the radius, and then you squared it instead of doubling it. That would be a shame. That would be a real shame. And I can kind of understand why you did it, because we got the radius by taking square roots of stuff. And so once you get the radius, an easy mistake to make would be to square it to get the diameter. But obviously that's not what you want to do. You have to understand your basic geometry. A diameter is just 2 radiuses. It's always that.
Yeah, or sometimes I think maybe I just like I'm thinking too quickly and I just need to like slow down and just like okay, like really like think through this and know what they're actually asking me as opposed to just like.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. The real key is to know your geometry. In other words, that really should be an ingrained fact in your head that a diameter is 2 radiuses.
Yeah, yeah, like I obviously yeah I do know that because I took geometry last year and I did all this stuff before and all that, but yeah, for me I think for me it's just okay, you're like I know the concepts, just
Okay.
don't worry about the first thing that comes into my head, just relax and just think, okay, diameter, right? What is that?
Right, exactly. Exactly. But also a key to this is you can't really solve for diameter immediately. I mean, you could,
Right,
but
yeah.
it makes the math much tougher. So solving for radius is the solution. And also, when I showed you all the formulas for these things, there's not one of them that's in terms of diameter. Everything is in terms of radius. Everything.
Right.
So when you see a question about diameter, just know that you need to solve for radius. Once you
Yeah,
solve
okay.
for radius, just double it, and then you have your diameter.
Sounds good.
All right, 36. These are a little more difficult, but again, this is a short problem that could be difficult. I would say which is harder between 36 and 38? I would say 36 without doing any more looking. In other words, I haven't read either one of them. I'm making that statement based entirely on the fact that that's got that many sentences. That means it's probably not that hard. Whereas this has got a relatively difficult looking function or equation.
Yeah.
It's not really that hard either.
Okay.
What makes 36 undefined? What would cause it to be undefined? What
Yeah.
number one rule of math that you can never do? And I mean the number one commandment. You go on Google and you say 10 commandments of math. You'll get 10 different lists, and every single one of them will have the same first commandment. And then they'll usually have different ones after that. But all of math recognizes this as perhaps one of the most important things in all of math. What can you not divide by? Ever.
You can't.
You can't divide by 0, ever. That's the first commandment of mathematics.
Yeah.
When you divide by 0, it makes something undefined. So, what do we have to do here?
Oh. So you just plug in 0?
No, you don't plug in 0. If I plug in 0 for x, I don't get a denominator of 0. This is what cannot be 0. That's your denominator. So we solve that equation. We make it equal to 0, solve it, and then we'll have our answer.
Okay.
As to what value of x will turn that denominator into 0. Now, to solve this, we clearly have a quadratic. That is going to produce an x squared term. We also have an x term, and we also have numbers. So the best way to solve this is going to be to just multiply that out and come up with the resultant quadratic, factor it if we need to, figure out what makes that whole thing equal to 0. Okay, so let's expand it out. Help me do that. do this part, and then
yeah.
add this part, and then add the 4.
Okay, so x minus 5 times, with parentheses around it, times x minus 5.
Go ahead and do that. Tell me the answer. X minus 5 times x minus 5. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
What is that?
Let's see. Minus 5 plus 25?
Okay, we're going to FOIL this. You've been taught FOIL?
Yeah, yeah.
Because not everybody's taught FOIL anymore. That's why I ask. Whenever you're multiplying two terms together, two polynomials, you're just going to multiply every term by every term. I prefer to call it ET, because that's every term by every term, and it works even if it's a trinomial times a trinomial. When you have a binomial times a binomial, FOIL works fine. That's the first, that's the outside, that's the inside, that's the last. That's where you get.
Oh, wait, so because every time I do this, I've never been one to be able to do that really quickly in my head, but the trick is just to add those two together and then square one of them?
You bring up a really good point, and let me talk about it for a moment. This is what is really useful to be able to do quickly. And the answer is a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. And I did not do that by FOILing it. I did it because I memorized it. Another one that's very useful is this one. And that's almost the same answer, except the middle term is minus 2ab. But it's still plus b squared. Okay? Well, when I am FOILing x minus 5, I'm using this one, right? What's the answer?
X squared plus 10x plus...
Hold on. Minus.
Oh, minus 10x. Oh, minus, sorry, 5x.
No, you were right. It's 2 times a times b. B is 5.
Right.
So it's 2 times x times 5. So 10x is correct. And then what's b squared?
Plus 25.
Okay. So that's a quick way to square any binomial term. And believe it or not, that is a talent that it's very useful to have, both for your tests and for math. If you go any higher in math, you're going to want to be able to do this fast. You don't want to have to do that the slow method, which is to FOIL it.
Right.
Knowing this faster method will come in handy, okay? So this right here turns into x squared minus 10x plus 25. And now let's finish the rest of it, add it, and simplify. So what does this become?
So plus 4 times x minus 5.
Distribute the 4.
So 4x. Yeah, so plus 4x minus 20.
And finally, the only thing left is that plus 4.
4.
That's what we want to set to 0. And I suspect this is going to turn into a very friendly quadratic. We only have one x. In other words, they're not going to give us a quadratic that you have to use the quadratic formula to solve.
Yeah, that would be a pain.
Well, they're just not going to do it. 25 minus 20 is 5, plus 4 is 9. It's plus 9. Notice how easy that is to factor. Go ahead and factor it for me. That'll give us our answer.
All right.
We can't solve it from this point. I don't know what value of x makes that thing equal to 0, but once I factor it, I will know.
So x minus 3 and the x plus 3.
No, it's x minus.
Is it still okay?
Let's
So
go back
and
and review that, because I want you to know how to factor, and I see some deficiencies there.
Yeah.
Factoring, people make it way too hard. The biggest mistake people make with factoring is they try to figure out the left term first. That's not the way to factor. The way to factor is you split up the x squared, that's step one. Then you determine both signs. That is the second step. Determine both signs. And you do that by, first of all, looking at that sign. The fact that that's a plus sign means both signs have to be the same. They can't be opposite. If one was plus and one was minus, then that would not be a plus 9. That would be a minus 9. The last step in foiling is to multiply that number times that number. So the sign on that constant tells you a lot about what both signs have to be. Now, they can either be plus plus or minus minus. Well, to answer that, I look to that sign. Once I've decided that both signs have to be the same, they have to be whatever the middle sign is of the middle term.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now there's really a simple third step. Factors of 9 that add, because that's a plus sign, to the number 6. Well, that's 3 and 3. That is what produces that quadratic. Remember what you're doing with factoring. You're just doing the reverse of multiplying. In other words, if
I know how to
x minus 3 times x minus 3, you multiply it together to come up with that. So we're just unmultiplying it.
Yeah.
Which tells us the answer. X has to be 3. That is the only value of x that makes that denominator be 0. And that's what makes that function undefined. Only. The full denominator has to equal 0. It's the only, any other number, and this function h of x is not undefined. It's only division by 0.
Okay.
Okay.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's a
problem if we recognize it. Basic algebra. That's all it is.
Yeah, because I just didn't know because I was I know how to factor, but what I always get confused about is the signs. And no one's ever really taught me that trick before with
there's lots of methods they teach factoring. There's the California method, there's the diamond method. I don't like either of those methods. I really find them confusing, and I find students don't like them either. But my method works really, really good as long as you have a simple quadratic. In other words, as long as the coefficient of the x squared is a 1. The moment that becomes a 2 or a 3, then my method is not quite so simple. It becomes more of a trial and error method. But you don't have to factor those kind of quadratics on this test. The only quadratics I'm ever going to ask you to factor are going to be simple ones like this. What I call first order quadratics. And I call them first order because the coefficient's always a 1 in front of the x squared. And when that is true, then it's a simple 3-step or 4-step at most process. It's very straightforward, very easy to understand. You just have to do both parts at once. Don't try to do one first and then the other. That's the wrong way to factor.
Okay.
Okay?
Makes sense.
Figuring out both signs is the key. That's the part you want to do second always. In other words, if that's a minus 9, then it's a plus minus. And then go for that. Okay?
Yep.
All right, Ben. I will talk to you next Saturday.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.